You know, when you look at a goldfish aquarium, it just looks like this perfectly peaceful, slow-moving world. But beneath that calm surface, there is literally an invisible, incredibly high-stakes battle of physics and biology happening every single second. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to make the unseen seen and really break down this incredible race against time that's happening right inside that glass box.
So, let's just dive right into it. The core question we're looking at today is, how fast does oxygen actually dissolve in a goldfish tank? Now, I know it sounds like a totally simple question, but the answer dictates the biological stability of your entire ecosystem, the waste processing capacity of your filters, and honestly, the survival of your fish. It's a literal race against time between the oxygen entering the water and the biological demands that are desperately trying to consume it.
To understand just how intense this race really is, we have to recognize the immense physical challenge that aquatic life deals with. Get this, water holds roughly 95% less oxygen by volume than the atmospheric air that you and I breathe. 95%! Plus, water is about 800 times more dense and 50 times more viscous than air. So your goldfish are basically running a marathon in an environment where their absolute primary life source is incredibly scarce.
Part 1. The baseline reality.
Okay, so to really grasp this baseline reality, we first have to look at the physical limits of dissolved oxygen, or DO for short. The oxygen your fish rely on is actually free atmospheric O2 that is dissolved into the water. It's completely separate from the oxygen bonded inside the H2O molecule. Think of it a lot like how sugar dissolves when you stir it into your morning coffee. The fish aren't breaking down water molecules, they're breathing the air trapped inside it.
And what's super fascinating here is how the environment dictates the absolute maximum oxygen capacity. This is a rule known in physics as Henry's law. Temperature is essentially your primary thermodynamic regulator. For example, at a chilly 5 degrees Celsius, water can hold a massive 12.7 milligrams per liter. But, and this is a big but, as that temperature warms up to 30 degrees, the kinetic energy of the water molecules increases, which literally bounces the oxygen out of the liquid. Suddenly, your maximum capacity drops down to just 7.54 milligrams per liter. Basically, warmer water physically holds a lot less oxygen.
Part 2. The dissolved oxygen budget.
I want you to think of your tank as a strict financial budget. Mechanical aeration makes deposits, that's your oxygen supply. Meanwhile, biological respiration makes constant withdrawals, and that's your demand. Let's look at the supply side first, and actually, let's bust a really common aquarium form myth while we're at it. You will often read online that rising bubbles don't oxygenate water, and only surface agitation matters. But the science shows that bubble columns from fine air stones are massively efficient. See, a wave maker relies completely on the flat, two-dimensional surface area at the top of the tank, which by the way can get coated in a restrictive, oily biofilm. Air stones, on the other hand, create an extreme amount of three-dimensional surface area because thousands of tiny bubbles are constantly renewing their boundary layers all the way up the water column. The scientific research backs this up completely, stating that the planar surface mass transfer coefficient is only 59% to 85% of the bubble mass transfer coefficient. Because those bubbles are transferring oxygen continuously throughout their entire vertical ascent and creating what scientists actually call turbulent oscillation, or, bubble wobble, they are phenomenally effective. In comparative testing, air stones can actually be up to 7 times more energy efficient at transferring oxygen than your standard wave makers.
Now, on the demand side of our budget, goldfish are highly active teleoths, which means they have very dynamic oxygen consumption. At just a routine, relaxed baseline, they're consuming anywhere between 88 and 180 milligrams of oxygen per kilogram of body weight every single hour. But if you feed them to satiation, boom, you get a 35% spike as their digestion ramps up. What if you net them or cause acute handling stress? You get a massive 140% spike in oxygen demand, and it takes them hours to recover from that.
But wait, it's not just your goldfish taking withdrawals from this budget. There are hidden thieves stealing your oxygen. The nitrifying bacteria in your filter, yeah, the good guys keeping the tank safe from ammonia, they actually reproduce and process waste twice as fast at 8.0 milligrams per liter of oxygen compared to 7.0. Plus, there's benthic decomposition, the decay of uneaten food and fish waste down in the gravel that consumes an absolutely massive 1 to 3 grams of oxygen per square meter every single day.
Part 3. How fast does it dissolve? So factoring in all these competing forces, exactly how fast does oxygen actually dissolve? Well, if you have a totally unstocked, pristine aquarium with no fish and no bacteria, the physical transfer kinetics can operate at absolute maximum efficiency. Why? Well, there's no biological sink competing with your aeration. So in an empty tank, a standard air stone can bring hypoxemic topwater up to 90% or even 100% saturation in just 5 to 30 minutes, which is incredibly fast.
But let's bring it back to a real-world scenario. In an actively stocked goldfish aquarium, establishing a stable, uniform oxygen profile takes a much longer 12 to 24 hours, because you have those active biological demands literally pulling oxygen out as fast as your hardware pushes it in. Not to mention diurnal swings where your live plants might produce oxygen by day, but actually consume it by night. It takes a full 12 to 24 hours of continuous mechanical aeration for the entire system to equilibrate and finally balance the budget.
Part 4. The deoxygenation crash.
So what happens when that delicate 24-hour balance is completely shattered, say, when the power fails? This right here is the ticking clock of a deoxygenation crash. Without active aeration, the biological sinks, your goldfish, the bacteria, the decaying substrate, they don't stop. They continue to aggressively consume oxygen. In a stock tank, your dissolved oxygen levels will crash from a really healthy 8.0 milligrams per liter straight down to critical, lethal hypoxia in a mere 2 to 8 hours. And if it happens to be a hot summer day, that warm water accelerates the bacterial metabolism, pushing you way closer to that 2-hour mark.
You absolutely need to know what this crash looks like. When oxygen drops below 4.0 milligrams per liter, your goldfish enter acute physiological stress. You are going to see some major red flag behaviors, severe lethargy, just sitting motionless at the bottom, or hovering right at the surface where that incredibly thin boundary layer of water touches the air. You'll also see rapid gill movement, which is essentially the fish equivalent of panting. If those levels drop below 2.0 milligrams per liter, there's no way around it. That results in suffocation-induced mortality.
Part 5. Emergency aeration and rescue.
When that 2 to 8 hour clock starts ticking, you have to pivot immediately to actionable, manual solutions to keep those fish alive. The absolute most reliable is something called the pitcher method. It's elegantly simple, but yeah, it definitely requires some elbow grease. You scoop out tank water with a clean pitcher, lift it about 12 to 24 inches above the surface, and just pour it back in to simulate a waterfall. That chaotic splash physically breaks the stagnant surface boundary layer and forces bubbles deep down into the water column. You want to do this for about 5 to 10 minutes. But here is the critical part. Do not miss this. Because the biological demand is constantly consuming oxygen, you have to repeat this entire process every single hour until the power returns.
Now, beyond the pitcher method, you can deploy a few supplementary tactics to help stretch out your oxygen budget. Doing a large water change introduces fresh, highly aerated tap water. You can also float sealed baggies of ice cubes to drop the temperature, which, as we learned earlier, physically increases the water's oxygen capacity. But the single most critical step you absolutely must take: stop feeding them immediately. Remember that 35% metabolic spike we talked about? The very last thing you want to do during an oxygen crisis is force your fish to expend precious energy trying to digest a meal.
So, we've covered a ton of ground today. The hidden physics of gas transfer, the undeniable efficiency of bubbles, the massive biological sinks hiding in your tank, and that incredibly stressful ticking clock of a power outage. Which leaves me with one final, provocative question for you to consider today. Take a good, hard look at your setup. Is your goldfish tank truly oxygenated right now with robust continuous aeration, or are your fish just surviving on the edge of a crash? I really hope this explainer has given you the exact knowledge you need to confidently answer that question and to build a truly thriving environment for your aquatic life.